I was not allowed to tell the nurse why I was hurt after my Amish wedding night. I was 19 years old when Nurse Helen Ward closed the examination room door and asked whether my new husband had caused the injuries beneath my wedding dress. The clinic smelled of rubbing alcohol and peppermint soap. I remember smiling at her while one of my hands shook beneath a blue-edged handkerchief. Outside, my husband sat beside our bishop, waiting to hear the answer we had rehearsed. Why had my mother failed to come when I signaled for her? Why did the nurse recognize my husband's name? And why had Bishop Amos warned me that telling the truth would destroy everyone except the man who had hurt me? Before I tell you what I answered, I must return to the autumn when Elias Brenneman first began coming to our house. My name is Miriam Yodar, though I have not used that surname for many years. I am 67 now. The events I am describing happened in 1978, in the northern Indiana district where I was raised. Our district was small enough that people noticed when a horse lost a shoe, but certain troubles could remain hidden for years. We knew one another's barns, gardens, children, debts, and family histories. What we did not know, we were taught not to ask. My father had injured his leg the previous winter when a wagon overturned. He survived, but he could no longer work long days without pain. By spring, the medical bills and feed accounts had begun arriving more quickly than we could pay them. I was the oldest unmarried daughter still at home. I cooked, washed, helped in the garden, and took sewing work from several families. I believed my usefulness was a kind of protection. As long as my hands remained busy, I thought no one could call me selfish. Then Elias started arriving after supper. He was 28, broad-shouldered, and quiet in a way people mistook for patience. He owned good farmland through his father's family, and he had recently finished building a white house at the far end of Brenneman Road. The first time he sat at our table, he barely spoke to me. He talked with Father about corn prices, fence posts, and the repair of our north barn. Before leaving, he placed an envelope beside Father's plate. Father covered it with his hand. I pretended not to notice. After Elias had gone, I asked Mother what was inside. She was kneading bread. Her hands stopped, but only for a moment. "Help," she said, "for the barn, for the family." She pressed her knuckles into the dough until it flattened beneath them. Elias returned the following Tuesday, and every Tuesday after that. He walked with me along the lane, though he never asked what I liked to read, or whether I wanted children, or what kind of home I imagined. Instead, he told me how his home would be run. He disliked curtains left open after dark. He believed wives should not visit their families without permission. He did not approve of women keeping private letters. He expected meals at exact times. He spoke of these things calmly, as though describing the dimensions of a cupboard. I told myself calmness meant kindness. The first warning came from my younger sister, Rebecca. She had been sent to deliver eggs to the Brenneman house one afternoon. When she returned, she found me cutting beans at the kitchen table. "His upstairs bedroom has a lock on the outside," she whispered. I laughed because I did not know what else to do. "Perhaps it is for storage. It is his bedroom. You should not have been wandering upstairs." Rebecca looked at me for a long time. I wasn't. I saw it from the landing. Mother entered carrying a basket, and Rebecca became silent. That evening, I asked Mother whether Elias had ever been promised to someone before me. She dropped a wooden spoon. The sound was small, but the room changed around it. "People have disappointments," she said. "What kind of disappointment?" Mother picked up the spoon and wiped it carefully on her apron. "The kind that should be left alone." 2 weeks later, Father announced that Elias had asked to marry me. No one asked whether I wanted him. That may sound unbelievable to people who grew up elsewhere, but in our household, silence was often treated as agreement. Father said Elias was dependable. Mother said marriage brought security. Bishop Amos said a willing heart sometimes followed an obedient decision. I wanted to believe them. Our barn roof had been repaired with lumber paid for by the Brennemans. The feed account had disappeared from Father's desk. New medicine arrived for his leg. Every improvement in our home felt like another knot being tied around my answer. When Elias asked me directly, we were standing beside the wash line. Sheets moved between us in the wind. "You understand what marriage requires?" he said. "I believe so. You will not carry household disagreements back to your parents." I hesitated. He watched me until I nodded. Then he smiled. It was the first time I had seen him smile at me, and I mistook my relief for affection. Mother began sewing my wedding dress. It was plain and dark blue, with small buttons down the front. On the final evening, she called me into her room and handed me a white handkerchief with blue stitching around its edges. In one corner, she had sewn 3 tiny red stitches. "My mother gave me something similar," she said. "What are the red stitches for?" She lowered her voice. "Should you ever truly need me, hang this where I can see it from the lane." I thought she meant illness or childbirth. "Will you come?" Mother folded my fingers around the cloth. "I will see it." "That is not what I asked." Her face tightened. "I will do what I can." At 19, I did not understand that those 2 promises were different. 3 days before the wedding, Rebecca came to me in the smokehouse. She carried a folded scrap of paper. I found this in Father's desk. It was a receipt bearing Elias's father's name. Beneath several amounts was a handwritten sentence stating that repayment would be suspended upon the marriage of Elias Brenneman and Miriam Yodar. I read it twice. "Our marriage is payment," Rebecca said. "No, Miriam, it is written there. It says repayment will be suspended. That is not the same." Even while defending it, I knew how foolish I sounded. I took the paper to Father. He was sitting near the stove with his injured leg stretched before him. When he saw the receipt, he did not ask where I had found it. "A family helps another family," he said. "And receives a daughter?" His jaw tightened. "Mind your words. Would the debt return if I refused?" Mother stood in the doorway. She did not look at me. Father's answer came slowly. "The roof cannot be placed back on the ground. Medicine cannot be returned to a bottle." That was when I understood that the decision had already been made. I went outside and considered running to my aunt's home 4 miles away. I even walked as far as the boundary fence. Then I imagined Father losing the farm. I imagined my brothers being hired out, Rebecca blamed for helping me, and Mother carrying the shame of a daughter who had disappeared before her wedding. I turned back. For years, I accused that younger version of myself of cowardice. I understand her differently now. She had been taught that everyone's survival rested upon her obedience. She did not believe she was choosing between marriage and freedom. She believed she was choosing between her own fear and her family's ruin. The wedding was held on a gray Thursday morning. People ate, visited, and spoke kindly of the home Elias and I would build. Father appeared happier than he had in months. Bishop Amos told me that sacrifice was the foundation of a lasting household. Mother buttoned my dress without meeting my eyes. When she reached the final button, I placed the blue-edged handkerchief inside my sleeve. "You remember what you said?" I asked. Her fingers paused at my wrist. "I remember." Elias drove me to his house near sunset. The place was spotless. The kitchen shelves held no dust. The chairs stood at exact angles. Even the firewood had been stacked according to size. On the table was a list. It included the time I should rise, the day I should bake, how often I could visit my family, and which cupboards I was permitted to use. I tried to joke that he had prepared instructions as though I were a hired girl. He did not laugh. "A household needs order," he said. Then he asked for the handkerchief. I had not shown it to him. Instinctively, I closed my fingers around my sleeve. "What handkerchief?" "The one your mother gave you." I felt the first real coldness of that evening. "How do you know about it?" "Your mother told mine. She did not want foolish signals creating misunderstandings." End quote. I stepped toward the door. Elias moved between me and it. What happened in the following minutes remained difficult for me to describe for many years. Not because I could not remember, but because I had been taught to separate each moment from the next. A hand on my wrist was merely impatience. A locked door was household privacy. A command was a husband's concern. Fear was a young wife's immaturity. Pain was an accident. If every piece was given a harmless name, no one had to admit what the pieces formed together. I remember the wash basin tipping. I remember the crack of its pitcher against the floor. I remember the blue-edged handkerchief slipping from my sleeve. Most clearly, I remember Elias picking it up and placing it in his pocket while I sat against the bed frame, struggling to draw a full breath. He did not shout. He knelt beside me and said, "You will calm yourself before anyone hears." That calm voice frightened me more than anger would have. I did not sleep. Before dawn, I began vomiting from pain and could not lift my left arm properly. Elias sent his younger brother to fetch Bishop Amos. The bishop arrived before my mother did. He stood in the kitchen while I sat wrapped in a shawl. Broken pottery remained beneath the table. "What occurred?" he asked. I looked at Elias. He answered for me. "She slipped while carrying the basin." Bishop Amos turned to me. "Is that correct?" I tried to speak, but Elias's hand settled on the back of my chair. The bishop saw it. He also saw the broken latch on the bedroom door and the mark around my wrist. His eyes moved away. "A new household must not begin with accusations," he said. "I need my mother. She has been informed." "Then why is she not here?" No one answered. Before taking me to the clinic, Bishop Amos explained what I was permitted to say. I had fallen. Elias had tried to catch me. The broken door latch had been damaged weeks earlier. The bruising on my wrist came from pulling myself upright. Nothing private from the marriage room was to be discussed with outsiders. He said the clinic staff would not understand our ways. He said officials might become involved. He said my younger siblings could suffer. Most of all, he said Father's financial agreement with the Brennemans could be withdrawn if I made a damaging claim. "You may speak carelessly for 1 minute," he told me, "and cause hardship that lasts generations." Then Elias returned my handkerchief. He had washed it, but one red stitch had come loose. That was how I arrived in Nurse Helen Ward's examination room, holding a handkerchief that had failed to bring my mother. Helen was perhaps 40, with silver beginning at her temples. She asked Elias and Bishop Amos to wait outside. Elias objected. "She is frightened." "That is why I need privacy," Helen said. He left only after she threatened to call the doctor. Helen examined my wrist, shoulder, and ribs. Her movements were careful. She explained what she was doing before she touched me, which nearly made me cry because no one else had offered me even that small choice. Then she looked at the name written on my intake form. "Brenneman," she said. Her eyes lifted to mine. "Is Elias related to Samuel Brenneman?" "Samuel is his father. And you were married yesterday?" I nodded. She sat on the stool across from me. "Miriam, did your husband cause these injuries?" The question felt louder than shouting. Outside, a floorboard creaked beneath someone's weight. I remembered Father's farm, Rebecca's frightened face, Mother standing in the doorway, Bishop Amos saying I could destroy everyone. "No," I whispered. "I fell while carrying the basin." Helen did not argue. She asked me to repeat it. I did. Then she said, "A woman named Clara gave me the same answer 7 years ago." I stopped breathing for a moment. "Who is Clara?" Helen studied my face and seemed to understand that I truly did not know. Before she could answer, the door opened. Bishop Amos stood there. "The examination is finished," he said. Helen rose sharply. "I did not call you. Miriam's family is waiting." "My mother?" His expression did not change. "Her family." Elias entered behind him. Helen wrapped my ribs and placed my arm in a sling. As she handed me my dress, she slipped a small card into the fold of my sleeve. I felt it against my skin, but did not look. On the drive home, Elias told me the nurse had tried to confuse me. "Who is Clara?" I asked. His hands tightened on the reins. "A troubled woman. Was she promised to you?" "She lived in our district for a time." The nurse said she gave the same answer. Elias turned toward me. "You will not speak that name in my home." That was the first rule on his list I deliberately broke. Over the next several weeks, I asked about Clara whenever I found myself alone with someone who might know. People reacted in different ways. Some claimed not to remember her. Others said she had been disobedient. One woman told me Clara had left after suffering a nervous collapse. Rebecca finally supplied the missing piece. She visited while Elias was working in the field and brought a jar of preserves. As soon as the door closed, she whispered, "Clara Stoltzfus was his wife." I stared at her. That cannot be true. They married in another district. She was here less than a year. I would have been 12. I would remember. The Brennemans said she was a cousin helping with the household. What happened to her? Father says she became ill and returned to relatives. Father knew? Rebecca looked ashamed. Everyone older than us knew something. I took Nurse Helen's card from its hiding place inside my sewing basket. On one side was the clinic's telephone number. On the other, Helen had written an address and 4 words. Clara is alive. Ask her. I had no telephone, no private transportation, and no permission to send letters Elias could not read. Still, that card changed me. Until then, I had believed I had misunderstood the wedding night. I thought perhaps I had frightened too easily, or resisted something every wife accepted. Clara's name meant there had been a before, and if there had been a before, then Elias's rules were not created because of me. I began watching the house more carefully. In a locked drawer beneath Elias's account books, I found an old medical invoice. It listed treatment for a broken finger, injured ribs, and recurrent household falls. The patient's name was Clara Brenneman. Beside the invoice was a letter from Nurse Helen to Bishop Amos. She had written that Clara's injuries required investigation and that Clara should be interviewed away from her husband. Across the bottom, in the bishop's handwriting, were the words, "Family matter resolved. No further action." I heard Elias's wagon in the yard and barely returned the papers before he entered. That night, he asked why the drawer key was not hanging straight. I said I had been dusting. He looked at me for several seconds. Then he removed every key from the house and began carrying them in his pocket. My world became smaller after that. He stopped my visits to my parents. He told neighbors I was weak from the accident. He read the few letters Rebecca managed to send. I hung Mother's handkerchief in the upstairs window twice. The first time, no one came. The second time, I saw Mother's buggy on the road near dusk. Hope rose so quickly that it hurt. I hurried downstairs and opened the door. Mother was not alone. Bishop Amos stepped from the buggy behind her. Elias came from the barn as though he had been expecting them. My mother had seen the signal. Instead of coming to rescue me, she had reported it. They sat around the kitchen table while I remained standing. Bishop Amos placed Nurse Helen's card between us. My mother had found it during her previous visit, hidden inside my sewing basket. "You entered my room?" I asked her. "I feared you were planning something dangerous." "I was planning to ask a woman what happened to her. Clara has no place in your marriage. She was his wife." Mother looked at the table. That silence answered more than words could have. "You knew," I said. Her mouth trembled. "I knew she had left." "Did you know why?" "I knew there were difficulties." I asked the question that had been waiting inside me since the clinic. "Why did you give me a signal if you never meant to help?" Mother reached for the handkerchief. I pulled it away. She said my father's farm would be taken if I left. Elias's father had made that clear after the wedding. She said Rebecca's prospects would be damaged. She said people would blame me for reopening old accusations. Then she said something I did not understand until years later. Some doors close on a woman, whether she walks through them or not. At the time, I heard only surrender. "You chose them," I said. "You came here with them." Mother began to cry silently. Bishop Amos told her to compose herself. That was the moment I stopped hoping the adults around me would become braver than their fear. For a while, I behaved exactly as Elias wanted. I rose at the time written on his list. I cooked his meals. I stopped asking about Clara. I allowed Bishop Amos to believe the matter had been settled. Elias mistook stillness for obedience. In truth, I was waiting. 6 weeks after the wedding, the clinic sent a notice saying my ribs and wrist required a final examination. Elias intended to accompany me inside, but a farm animal became sick that morning. He ordered his sister Martha to take me instead. Martha was not kind, but she was impatient. When we reached town, she said she had errands and would return in 1 hour. For the first time since my wedding, I entered a building alone. Nurse Helen saw me in the corridor. She did not ask why I had ignored her card. She simply guided me into the same room and locked the door. "Clara lives at that address?" I asked. "She did when I wrote it." "Why did she leave?" Helen's expression became careful. That is Clara's story to tell, but she tried to report what happened in that house. She was pressured to change her account. By Bishop Amos? By several people. Did my mother know? I cannot answer that. Can you help me reach Clara? Helen considered the clock. Not today, but I can help you speak to someone who can explain your choices. Choices. The word sounded almost foreign. Helen brought in a county social worker named Margaret, who spoke with me for 20 minutes. She said I could leave the house. She said debt agreements did not give anyone ownership of another person. She said a statement could be taken without Elias present. I wanted to believe her. Then I imagined my family's farm. What happens to them if I speak? Margaret did not offer a comforting lie. I cannot promise there will be no consequences. I stood to leave. Helen touched the door before I opened it. Miriam, what happened on your wedding night? I still could not answer, not because I had forgotten, because once spoken, the truth would require something from me. I returned home with a new card hidden inside the lining of my sling. It contained Margaret's telephone number and a time when she would be waiting at the clinic each Thursday. For 3 weeks, I said nothing. Then Elias announced that we would attend a district meeting where I was expected to apologize publicly for causing concern after the wedding. The apology had been written for me. It stated that fear and immaturity had caused me to behave foolishly, that my husband had acted with patience, and that outsiders had encouraged distrust. I read it at the kitchen table. When is the meeting? I asked. Thursday. The same day Margaret would be waiting. Elias placed the blue-edged handkerchief beside the paper. You will carry this, he said. Your mother believes it will remind you of your duty. One red stitch still hung loose in the corner. That night, I made my decision. On Thursday morning, Elias drove me toward the meeting house. Bishop Amos waited there with my parents and several elders. As Elias slowed the buggy, I saw my mother standing beside the steps. For one moment, she and I looked directly at each other. Then she glanced toward the road leading into town. It was a small movement. Perhaps I imagined its meaning. Perhaps she was only afraid, but I chose to treat it as permission. Before Elias had fully stopped, I climbed down from the buggy and began walking. He called my name. I kept walking. Bishop Amos ordered me to return. I kept walking. Then Elias caught my arm, the same wrist that had only recently healed. That touch brought me back to the bedroom, the broken pitcher, and his calm voice telling me not to let anyone hear. I turned and said, loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Do not touch me again." He released me. A delivery truck approached along the road. I raised my hand and the driver stopped. I asked for a ride to the county clinic. No one followed immediately because none of them believed I would truly speak. They were wrong. Helen was waiting near the reception desk when I entered. Margaret came from an office carrying a folder. They took me into the same examination room. The peppermint soap smelled exactly as it had 6 weeks earlier. Helen placed a blank statement on the table. "Tell us only what you are ready to tell," she said. This time, I told the truth. I said that on my wedding night, Elias had locked the bedroom door after I asked to return to my parents' home. When I tried to leave, he seized my wrist and pulled me away from the door. I lost my balance against the washstand, and when I attempted to rise, he forced me back down. My ribs struck the wooden bed frame, the pitcher shattered, and I could not breathe properly afterward. I explained that he had taken the handkerchief Mother gave me so I could not signal for help. I explained that Bishop Amos had seen the broken room and my injuries before ordering me to say I had fallen. I explained that my father's debt, my siblings' futures, and the possible loss of our farm had all been used to keep me silent. I told them my mother knew there had been another wife. I told them the bishop had buried Nurse Helen's warning about Clara. I told them Elias had not lost control. He had enforced control. Then I signed my name. That signature was the irreversible act everyone had warned me against. Elias and Bishop Amos arrived before I finished. They demanded to take me home. Margaret stood between them and the examination room door, while Helen called the sheriff's office. Elias remained calm. He said I was confused. Bishop Amos said outsiders were interfering in a sacred marriage. Then Helen opened the old clinic file and placed Clara's medical record beside mine. The injuries were not identical, but the explanations were: household falls, broken pottery, a husband who refused to leave the examination room, a bishop who called it resolved. For the first time, their calmness no longer looked like authority. It looked like a rehearsed performance. I did not return to Elias's house. Margaret arranged a temporary room for me in town. A week later, Helen helped me contact Clara, who was living in Ohio under her maiden name. We spoke by telephone. Her voice shook when I said who I was. I wondered who they would send into that house after me, she said. Clara had escaped after 11 months. She had tried to warn families in our district, but Elias's relatives described her as unstable. Bishop Amos had advised people to destroy her letters. My mother had received one. She had hidden it. That knowledge hurt more than losing my marriage, my home, or the approval of the district. Mother had not entered the arrangement blindly. She had known enough to fear for me, which was why she created the handkerchief signal. But when fear became real, she chose the farm, the family standing, and the safety of the children still at home. Years later, I came to understand her motive. Understanding did not make her choice harmless. My statement began an investigation. Elias denied everything. Bishop Amos claimed he had only tried to prevent misunderstanding. There were meetings, legal papers, and months during which people I had known all my life crossed streets to avoid me. My father lost part of his land, though not the entire farm. The debt agreement was challenged, and the Brennemans could not enforce every threat they had made. Rebecca left the district 2 years later. She became a school secretary and raised 3 children who were allowed to ask questions at the dinner table. I trained as a nursing assistant. Later, I worked in elder care. I never became a nurse like Helen, but I learned how important it is to close a door, sit at eye level, and let a frightened person answer in their own time. I did not speak to my mother for 11 years. Then a small package arrived without a return address. Inside was the blue-edged handkerchief. Mother had repaired the loose red stitch. Beside the original 3, she had added a 4th. There was no letter, only the cloth. I never learned exactly what she intended the 4th stitch to mean. Perhaps it was an apology. Perhaps it represented the daughter who had left. Perhaps Mother could still communicate only through signals because plain words felt too dangerous. I visited her once before she died. We did not reconcile in the simple way stories sometimes promise. She admitted she had been afraid. She admitted she had shown Clara's letter to Bishop Amos instead of giving it to me. She said she believed preserving the family would eventually give me a better life. "You preserved everyone except me," I told her. She nodded. "I know that now." I understood her fear. I did not excuse her decision. For many years, I believed my silence in that clinic proved I was weak. I believed courage would have meant answering Nurse Helen correctly the first time. Age has taught me something gentler. A person who has been surrounded by threats may need to be asked more than once. She may need a locked door, a patient witness, a written address, and time to imagine that a different life is possible. The first time Helen asked, I repeated the lie they had given me. The second time, I told her what happened. That second answer became the beginning of everything I have called my own. I still keep Mother's handkerchief folded beside a copy of the statement I signed in 1978. I no longer think of it as a signal asking someone else to come and save me. I keep it as proof that, eventually, I came for myself.